So today we'll start off with a new topic in Servlet technology that is called as listener. Okay. For understanding listener, you have to understand one more concept called as event. Okay, because these both go hand in hand. So you have to understand the concept of event. Then you'll understand what is a listener. But what is an event first of all? Generally, according to English. Normal English will talk. Forget all this programming now. Anything which happens is called as an event. Okay, anything which happens or anything which occurs. Okay, anything which occurs is called as an event. From English point of view, I am teaching you. First, I'll teach you English, then I'll teach you Java. Correct now? Yeah. Anything which occurs is called as an event, or I can also say, simple words, it's an occurrence, or it's a happening. So many definitions I can give for what? Event. So if you understand this, okay, then we can understand what? Listener. So first of all, this is the basic meaning in simple English what an event is. Now what I will discuss is, we'll see that, okay, so when you are developing a web application, this is a web application. The client makes a request. This will be your server. This is the client. This is the server. Inside the server, okay, you got a web container. So today we'll be discussing all the events which occur in the server side. Clearly understand the difference. One is client side. Other one is what we are discussing? Server side. We are discussing the server side events. Actually, I got two types of event. One is the client side event, other one is the server side event. Okay, so right now we are completely focusing on server side event. So in the server side, in the web container, there are so many events which occur inside the web container. Okay, so I'll discuss about those events now. So that's what you mean by an event now. So first I'll introduce event, then we'll go with listener, because both go hand in hand. One cannot exist without other. So if you understand what an event is, then you'll understand what a listener is. So here, server side events, all the events will be occurring here inside the web container. Let's start showing you all that now. So the idea is what you know. Basically, I'll teach you what are those events. If that event happens, I want some logic to execute. That's the idea. If that event, I'll explain how many events are occurring in the server side. If that event happens, I want some logic to execute. We'll see what kind of logics we write. First concept we'll cover. Then we'll see how to apply it into an application. First you have to understand purely only the concept you focus. Then I'll be showing you how it will be applied in practical scenarios. Okay, see, listener is an interface in Java which is responsible to listen to some events. Okay, now there are some events which occur in the server side in the web container. This is very important. There are some events which occur in the server side. This is very crucial. I'll underline this better. Make it italics and I'll underline. Okay, means you should very clearly understand. These are server side events. That important it is. Because slowly you'll understand, you'll be working on client side events also. But we are purely discussing on server side events inside the which container? Web container. Okay, see, select context creation, that's an event. They are considering all this as an event. Okay, context destruction is an event. HTTP session creation is an event. HTTP session destruction, these are all events. So one by one we'll start understanding now. Okay, select context creation. When does this event happen? When the server starts. When the server starts, the context object gets created. So that is one event. Okay. And if you want to execute any logic during that event, you can do it. Some logic if you want to execute, you can do it. I'll show you how to do it. Okay. So then similarly, when the select object is getting destroyed, if you want to execute any logic, you can do it. Understood? So like this, for events, for any particular event, you have got one interface now. Listener interface is there. So if you implement that interface, automatically it will execute. If this event happens, the logic in that class what you are writing now, it will be executed. We'll see that. HTTP session creation. When does the session object get created now? Wait. I know how good you are in this. Okay. Course is almost all coming to an end. Still you don't know when the session object is getting created. You should know very clearly the session object you should understand in two scenarios now. One, in the servlet, when does the session object get created? In the JSP, when does the session object get created? There is a variation. So in the servlet technology, means if you have written the code in servlet, the session object has to be created explicitly by calling request.getSession. Only then the session object gets created in the servlet. Okay, in the JSP, it is implicitly created. You don't have to bother about creating the session object. So there is a variation. In the servlet, when you say request.getSession, then the session object is created. It has to be created explicitly. In the JSP, it will be created implicitly. Done? Now when does the session object get destroyed? Again there are two ways. Implicit, explicit. Explicitly you can destroy by telling session.invalidate. Immediately session object will be destroyed. Or implicitly also it will be destroyed. How? You have to configure the time. And the time can be configured in two ways. One programmatically. Session.set max inactive interval. That is in seconds. Or if you want, you can configure it in web.xml. The tag you have to use, session timeout. Okay, there if you configure it will be in minutes. But you have to configure it. So session object will be created and destroyed in this particular way. But both are events. Remember that. Creation is also an event, destruction is also an event. Now servlet request creation. Means request object gets created now. That is also an event. When does the request object get created? When the request comes. Any request, let it come. 1 user, 2 user, 3 users. How many requests keep coming now? Those many request objects will go on getting created. Now again, when will the request object be destroyed? Only when the response is given. Only when the response is given, then only the request object will be destroyed. You should know the life of all these objects. Clear? So from day 1 of servlet till now I am covering that only. Then fine. Next, adding attributes to request object. Request.set attribute. That is an event. Removing attributes from request object. Request.remove attribute. That is an event. Similarly, adding attributes to session object. Session.set attribute is an event. Understood? Removing attributes from session object. Session.remove attribute. That's an event. Context attribute. That's an event. Context.set attribute. Context.remove attribute. They are also two events. Session object activation and passivation. That's an event. Session migration is an event. Okay. This I will come back and explain you in depth slowly. Okay. But all these events you are clear. This also I have explained to you, but I will revisit this topic by the end of this class. Session object activation and passivation. Yeah. Like this, plenty of events are there. So when this particular event happens, any event, like it might be sometimes you will be focused on this. If the context object gets created, you want to execute some logic. Yes, you can do it. Or when an attribute is added into the context object, you want to execute some logic. Fine, that also can happen. Okay, so how you do it, that's what we are going to learn now. So fine, these are the events here. Yes, now when any one of the above mentioned event is happened inside the container, we can ask the container to do some task when that particular event has happened. Clear? To handle the above listed events, Sun has provided the following listener interfaces. So again we are exploring what? Servlet API. We are exploring the Servlet API. Library support. Okay, these are the interfaces now. See, these are all interfaces. Servlet context listener, Servlet request listener, HTTP session listener, Servlet context attribute listener, Servlet request attribute listener, HTTP session attribute listener, HTTP session activation listener, HTTP session binding listener. So like this you have got some listener interfaces. And these listener interfaces, okay, again get the point. Every listener will have an event. Means all these listeners what you saw, they have an event. And all events are classes in Java. So following are the event classes which will be used by the above specified listener interface. Means Servlet context event. It's an object and it's a class. So this object will be used by one listener interface here. Means one listener will use one type of event class. We'll see it when you see the code only you'll understand. These are concepts now first. Again, this is an event, HTTP session event class, Servlet request event class. This is class Servlet context attributes event. This is class HTTP session binding event. This is class Servlet request attribute event. These are all classes. So these event classes will be used by this listener interfaces now. Fine. So what I'll do now, I will focus on only listeners related to Servlet context. I'll be only concentrating among all the events here. I'll be concentrating mainly on the most important events. The most important events which the developer should know and he'll use extensively in projects are adding attributes. Anything you can depend, adding attributes, okay, or it can be adding attributes, then session creation, and which I put tick mark 4, and these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are the most important events. So I'll be right now, the first example I'll be focusing is context object creation and context object destruction. First I'll concentrate on that. Okay, I'll just show you. If that event happens, automatically some logic gets executed. First focus on these two. Clear? So apart from that, see these two, apart from these two events, there are other events with context object. Which are the other events with context object? Adding attributes to context, removing attributes from context. Yes, these are also other events. So I'll be first focusing on only context object related events. Clear? So see this. Listeners related to Servlet context. There are two listeners related to Servlet context. Servlet context listener, Servlet context attribute listener. And these two listener interfaces will use these two event classes. There are two event classes related to the above mentioned Servlet context listener, Servlet context listener, Servlet context event, Servlet context attribute event. These are the event classes used by these two interfaces. Okay, and these two listeners will support you these many events now. These two listeners will support you these many events. How many events? Servlet object, context object is created, context object is destroyed, attribute is added, attribute is removed from Servlet context, attribute is replaced in Servlet context. I listed all these events on the top. See this. So out of that I am picking only 5 events related to what? Servlet context. Understood? Now write down the steps also. If you want to write a listener, very simple it is. You have to write a Java class by implementing which one means, see, the scenario is very simple. When the context object gets created, automatically I want some logic to execute. That's it. I don't have much requirement. As soon as the context object is getting created, I want some logic to execute. Similarly, as soon as the context object is destroyed, I want to execute some logic. That's all my requirement. It can be any number of lines. Logic means it can be any huge. Understood? But it should execute only when the context object is created, and some logic should execute only when the context object is destroyed. Particularly at that time only, I don't want in between. Wherever I want it to be executed. Only when these two events are happening, that time only I have to execute this. So for doing that, hardly I have to follow 3 steps, nothing else. The first step would be you have to write a Java class. You have to write a Java class by implementing what? Servlet context listener, that's it. First step would be write the Java class by implementing Servlet context listener. That's the first step, step 1. I'll just show it to you. Okay, you have to write Java class by implementing what? So you are dealing with which event now? When the context object is created, when the context object is destroyed. Okay, so for these two events, they are given the support to one listener interface, which is that Servlet context listener. So you can see it here only. Steps to implement Servlet context listener. So first step, what? Write a Java class by implementing Servlet context listener interface, which is available in javax.servlet package. Clear? Next step, what is that? Override the following 2 methods. Which 2 methods? Context initialized, context destroyed. These are the 2 methods you have to override, that's it. And write your logic over. Whatever logic you want, you write. Okay. So here the logic what you write here will execute when the context object gets created. And the logic what you write here will execute when the context object gets destroyed. And look at the parameter here. The parameter is of type what? Servlet context event. This is the class. So the listener class will be using this event class. Means whenever that event occurs, whenever that event happens, one object will be created. Which object will be created now? When the context object is created, okay, this object also will get created now. Servlet context event object. Like this, many objects are getting created in the server side. When the context object gets created, the Servlet context event object also will be created. Okay, and it will be sent as an argument to this method. And all is happen implicitly. You don't have to worry. You don't bother about when the event is happening now. You don't bother about calling this method. Nothing you do. You just write your logic and put it there. It will get executed. Okay, so these are the only two methods you have to override, and after that you have to register this listener into one web.xml as this. That's it. One tag you have to use. That's it. Which tag? Listener tag. And which is the listener class? com.cluster.myServlet, fully qualified class name. If you will deploy it now. Once you deploy it now, what will happen? See, if that event happens, this class only should execute. How does the container know? Container will not know. You have written the class, agreed. But which class you have written, you have to give the information to the container. Okay, so that's why you have to specify it here. Okay, and remember the XML file, the web.xml file is called as a DD file. What is DD, you know? Deployment descriptor file. So you are deploying this also into the server now, this class. So whatever you deploy into the server, you should specify that in the XML file. Otherwise container will not know. Understood? So this is metadata programming. So in the XML file you have to specify it, or we call it as register. Okay, register that in the web.xml file. That's it. If you register it when the container, when the server starts, during the server startup time, what will happen? The XML file will be parsed and all this information will be collected and stored into the server. Okay, so when that event happens, automatically what will happen now? It knows which class to execute. Which class? This class will be executed. And in that class, these two methods will be executed. So remember, this is a deployment descriptor. Means whatever you deploy, you have to describe it in the XML, which one? Web.xml file. Yeah? And similarly, you can notice you have even specified your servlet. If this is the URL, that should execute. Writing class is not important. Giving information about that class to the container is very important. So do this. Only 3 steps. That's it. A huge headache of what you wanted has been solved. Your requirement was actually very big. Your requirement was what? When the context object gets created, you want to execute the logic. If all this support was not there, imagine if the support was not there, what would have happened? You have to find out the event when it is happening. Then you have to call the methods. You will write your own methods and call it. All that headache is not happening here. All these methods will be called implicitly. These are all called by the container. If that event happens, this code will be executed now. So let's see a simple example on this. Okay. So this again we'll put it into a new workspace. Okay, we'll put it into a new workspace. Go to D drive. Ravi Kumar is my folder. In this, create one more workspace called as Servlet listener examples. So this will be the workspace. Done. So here you put all your projects. I already got these projects, so just I'll execute and show it to you. The first example I'll show you now. Very interesting example. See, this context listener is the example project. Okay. So in this project, can you guess what I'm having? I'm not having any logic here. Just what I've done. I've written on listener, nothing else. See this, same copy paste I've done. And this class is there, and I have put that web.xml, that's it. Nothing else is there in this project. I've written the class. Okay, and I have registered into the web.xml. That's all. Project over. No Servlet, no JSP. So why I'm not bringing Servlet and JSP and all this? My concept is events and listener. So then I'll add it into the project. So now when do you think this will execute now? When the context object is created. Now when do you think this method will execute now? This method will execute when the context object is created. This method will execute when the context object is destroyed. When does the context object get created? When the server starts, or when you will deploy the application to the server, and when the server starts, automatically it will get executed. Now when does the context object get destroyed? Server shuts down. So till the server is running, the context object is alive and you can use it. So, but once the server is shut down, it will be destroyed. So during that time, this logic will execute now. Just I put SOPs, just concentrate on that. Later on, I'll write some good business logic you can write. Clear? So very simple, just to deploy it. Now see, there's a server, console, nothing is there. Okay, server is there. Okay, I'll start the server if you want. Till now the application has not been deployed. See the console, nothing has got executed here. Still I have not deployed, that application has not been deployed. If you want, you can see here in the server, see, there are no applications. I'll deploy now. You know how to deploy now? Right click, run as, run on server. Next, finish. Just to deploy it, see what happens. Okay, leave that. No URL, nothing, no. Just concentrate on the console. See that method got executed now. Automatic now. Servlet context initialized. Was this output before? No, it was not there. But now it is printing. Clear? So that is this. So this is that logic was written inside this method now. Automatically. So simple now. Developer has been provided with so much of extensive support in programming here. Unbelievable. You just have to understand where to write your code now. That's it. You just concentrate on the business logic and find out where you want to write it. Understood? So fine. This is one thing. And here, see, when will this execute now? I'll stop the server. Just see this. Now go to the console. Well, very simple. Okay. So see, what you have to understand now is, if this support was not there, then you think. You saw the output, it's okay. If this support was not there, what should the developer do? You have to write the logic when that event is occurring. Okay, then you have to write your own class, something like class A. Your own class you'll write, and you'll have your own methods, void M1 or something like that, void M2. Imagine all the headache. If that event happens, then you have to create an object of this class, you have to call the method, all that big headache would have been there. Now nothing. That's why they are giving you that listener interface. Okay, if that event happens, that class will execute, but you have to register it. So like that, you'll have many listener classes written. All the listener classes you will register into web.xml. Right now I have written only for Servlet context listener. You can write it for session listener or anything. So all the listeners you will register. When that particular event happens, that particular listener class will, logic inside that class will execute. Terrific support this is. Okay, so most important, and it will be used extensively. Okay, and you'll slowly understand why it is used, where it is used, how it will be used. All that you'll understand as you go on coding. But just understand there is a concept called as listener, event and listener. Both go hand in hand. One cannot exist without the other. Understood? So what are the steps? 3 steps clear now? Write the class, implementing that interface. Second one what? Override the methods. Okay, third one is what? Register it. Okay, now sometimes, by chance I'll give an example now. If you don't want any logic to be executed during the context destruction time, but you want to execute some logic during the Servlet creation time, fine, what you'll do? Don't write any logic in context destroy. That's it. If you don't want any logic, don't write. If you want, write. They are not. It's not mandatory that you have to override and write the logic in both the methods. In one method you write, in another method don't write anything. But you compulsory have to give the body because you are implementing an interface. Remember that. See this. According to my scenario, what I discussed, I don't want to execute when the any logic when the context object is getting destroyed. Remove it. What is there? That's all. Over now. But you have to give the body for this method. Why? You are implementing an interface. That's it. So you decide what you want to do. And here in see readme.txt I have written it clearly. Don't look for any URL here. There is no Servlet.jsp in this application. This is just a demo for the context object creation, event and listener. So just deploy the application and see the output of Servlet context listener getting executed. That's all. Nothing is there in this example. Yeah? And now we'll go with context attribute listener, Servlet context. So that's also an event. When the attribute is added into the context object, okay, one event is considered. They are considering that as an event. If that time, if you want to execute on logic, that is also possible. But for that, which interface will implement? Can you guess? Context attribute listener. My listener, class name can be anything, but it should implement context attribute listener. Attribute added is the method you have to override. Three methods: attribute removed and attribute replaced. You know what is replacing? Added, you know, context dot add attribute. Okay, sorry, context dot set attribute is adding. Somehow you get as okay, ctx dot set attribute. Example: name, comma name, strname or name. Okay, so what is this? This is attribute added. Attribute removed will be what? Means if you execute this logic, it's an event. For when that event happens, this logic will execute now. Understood? Same way, context dot remove attribute. Which attribute you want to remove? Remove. But this is an event. Okay, one second. I'll add two events. I'll see. Context dot set attribute. Name, comma strname. This is one event. By chance, if you add one more attribute, again what happens? It is one more event. So how many attributes I add, those many events will be considered. And that many times this method will execute. Remember, if I add one attribute, it will execute. Another attribute, again it will execute. Clear? Set attribute, I'll add phone, comma strph. Like this, I'll add. So two events, two times that method will execute. Understanding what is attribute? Adding attribute. Understood when this method gets executed? Fine. Next, if I want to remove attribute, ctx dot remove attribute. Name, that's it. So attribute will be removed. Understood? If you want, you can remove it. But only one event now. If you want, you can remove both the attributes. Again, it will be two events. Context dot remove attribute. Phone, yes, two events now. That time, two times this method will execute. Logic, you write anything, that is secondary. Just see the flow. And who is calling all these methods? Container. All these classes, all the methods in this class is called by the container, and that's why they are telling implement that interface and override this method only. You cannot use your own methods, M1, M2 and all. So that's why if that event happens, particularly they are calling this method only. Context attribute means if I add the attribute in the context object, attribute added method only will be called. In which class? This class. Okay. And if I remove this method only will be called, which one? Attribute removed. So it's very specific. There also context initialized, context destroyed. Previous example. Those methods only will be called. Clear? So you have to follow the rules. Just write logic. That's it they are telling. And okay, now replacing. Okay, let me not remove it. I'll come to the third one now. Attribute replaced. I'm not remove. I have added. Supposingly if I say ctx dot set attribute again with the same name. What? Name. Comma, I'll write hello. Something else I'll add. But attribute name is what? Same, no? So what will happen? It will overwrite, no? Overwriting is nothing but what? Replacing. So this is also an event. Adding on attribute, replacing on attribute, removing an attribute. They are all events. Yeah? So that time this method will be executed. So you got the concept now. Only I have to show you what? Output. So just I'll show you. If that event happens, that logic will get executed inside this class. You understanding what is replacing? Hello I have written. Any value you can give, any other value. Similarly, I can replace this attribute also. Context dot set attribute of what? Set attribute of phone, comma, any value you give, your wish. Replaces. Now phone value will be replaced. Previous value will be replaced with this new value. So that is called as replacing. Clear? So you got the concept now. This is the listener class. Again, what you have to do? You have to write a class implementing it. Next, what you have to do? Register it. See this? Understood how to register? So container also. So when you start the server, container will parse and read all this information. It knows what? If this URL comes as remove, it should execute second servlet. If the request comes means if the URL comes as set, it should execute first servlet. All that it knows. Similarly, if that event happens, it should execute the code in this class. So you are registering all these things to the server by writing it in web.xml. Remember, it is metadata programming. Simply writing one class, server will not know what to do, or container will know what to do. So you have to write your class and give all the information about your class to the container by specifying it in web.xml like this. Clear? So I have registered it. So that's it. So now see, example is very simple. I'll deploy it. So the first page would be this login.jsp. Again, here also only concept. I am not showing anything practical here. So the user is getting name and giving values. Two values, what, like name and phone. Once he gives these two values, what will happen? It will come to URL will be generated as set. So if it is set, you just now saw it. It will go to first servlet. Set first servlet. So what is first servlet doing? Very simple. It will get those values and put it into the context. Immediately that logic will execute. Which time the logic in the listener class. I am adding 2 times an attribute. So 2 times that method will be called. Attribute added. And after that I will forward it to a.jsp. Fine. Now a.jsp, it will come now. What is a.jsp doing? Nothing, it will display it. Attributes have been added. If you want to remove the attribute, click here. So if you click here, the URL will be generated as remove. So remove will go to which servlet, you know? Second servlet. What is second servlet doing? Removing it. You are writing your logic in your own way. But if these two events are happening, that side that logic is getting executed. Which logic? Attribute added and attribute removed logic will be executed. Replaced I am not doing. Understood? So here these two methods will get executed. That's it, simple. And now again, select context attribute listener is using what? This event class. See there? Attribute listener is using this event class. Now we'll start seeing there are many methods in this class. One of the method in this class is get servlet context. Now I started using that event class. Okay. So if I call that, return type of that is what? Servlet context. So now means the idea is what, when you're writing logic you need values, and your values will be kept in many objects like context object or session object, request object and all that. So if you want the values, how do you get now in this listener class? So you call the method, you'll get the reference to your context object. Now with context object you can get your values. If you want to use the value, use it. That is secondary now. How will you use the value, how will you write your logic, that is secondary. But I am showing you how in the listener class you can get the reference to context object. Understood? That is crucial here. So see this, I got the reference, I am getting the value also. I can get whatever attribute added you can get. That's your wish now. If you want to get it and you write the logic and all that. But I am doing SOP. I am just printing now. See S1, S2. Okay. So it will print also. Clear? So this is how it executes now. So let's see the output now. So only on extra, you know how to add an attribute into context and you know how to remove an attribute from the context. Just write an extra class called as listener. That's it. So again we'll deploy this. So for this you have to make the request to login.jsp first. Yeah, come to the server console. See this attribute added null. That method is getting executed. Timing. Wait. This context initialized is from the previous example. There are two applications deployed now, and for both applications, one context object will be created. Remember, for one application you'll have one context object. Okay, understood now? But see, this is lab. Practically, in one server, only one application will be running. Here, in one server, there are so many applications running. Clear? So fine, and these things are executed. What we do, just clear the console, keep it neat. Okay, now make the request. See, first time whatever comes, you just clear it off. Then you type Ravi, or whatever you want, you type name and phone 111, whatever you want, you type. So when I submit this, where it will go? First select now. What is the first select doing? Just getting the values, setting the attribute, nothing else. And you'll forward it to a.jsp. See this? You're doing it, it's come to a.jsp. Meanwhile, what has happened? The method was called twice. One when you added name, other one when you added phone. Two times you added. So the twice the method gets executed. So first time when you added Ravi, it executed. And it prints also in attribute added method Ravi. But still this one was null. Next time you add, again that same method executes and it will print both the values. Okay, see this code if you want I show. My listener. First time means get attribute, you got it. But the first time phone will be null. When you add the first attribute, phone will be null. So that's why it was printing what? Null here. But next time it will print both. So go through all this. Okay. So then I find. So you're in this JSP now. Which one? If I click remove, it will go to which one now? Second select. And in second select, what is happening? Remove. See, again the logic got executed. Attribute removed, attribute removed. Two times you removed the attribute now. Logic is getting executed now. What a support. Think about the support. Excellent support it is. That event happens, immediately that logic will execute. Understood? So fine. Again, if you want, you can execute more times also. See, again clear the console. Console is cleared now. There's nothing. Again try once more. What is there? Login.jsp run as. Okay, see this. There's nothing now. Okay. See, in this example, we are concentrating only on what? Attribute added, attribute removed. One on example, one on event I'm taking. Understood? So here I'll add Q. Some name. Phone is what? 222. Anything you give. That's your wish. First or later? Yes. See the output? First select it went no. Then next, you'll remove the attribute. Yes or no? It will go to second select. See? That's it. So simple concept. Done? So just you have to write the code there. Nothing else is there. So for this also, what did you do? You got it now? You wrote the class and registered into web.xml like this. Okay. Now you understood what are events and listeners. That too we specifically saw events and listeners related to context object. See this? This is what we learned now. Listeners related to select context. There are two listeners related to context. Select context listener, select context attribute listener. These are the two event classes. And with these two listeners and two event classes, we can handle these 5 events. Done? So like that, you will slowly understand how to learn, use others also. Fine. Now I'll give you a practical scenario. How these events and listeners can be used for writing logic. Okay. My requirement is simple. Now many times you develop web application. Okay, now when we develop the web application, always somewhere in the application I want to display to the users only how many total users have logged in, total number of users, and how many current users are still using the application. So two things have to be displayed now. My requirement understanding the application is a requirement of the application. So when the user logs in to the application, he should get a message, total users. Somewhere, some corner you can display total number of users who have used the application. Means that from the beginning, anytime they could have come and logged out also, but total users, it will depend on 105 depending on the number of users. Total users. Now current users, how many users are currently accessing the application? It might be 27 or something like that. Example I am giving you. So current users, it should display me as well as total number of users. Now you might be thinking it's a big logic to write. How do you keep a track of all this? Yes or no? Very simple. So for this what we'll do is, when the session object gets created now, we'll consider that one visit has happened. One user has logged in. Means one user. When the session object gets created, one user has logged in. Means one count one. When the session object gets destroyed, okay, fine, no problem. That time what you do means we will right now be using the events. Which events now? Session creation and destruction event we will use now. In this scenario I will use session object creation and destruction event. And some counter you will set there. I++, j minus minus, something like that, one counter you will set. That's it. If you set two counters there in those two methods, automatically what will happen? It will display this. That's all concept. Okay, it looks big when a requirement is given, it looks very big, but once you know you're in and out of all the support you got for your development, logic becomes very simple. Okay, just I'll show you that now. So for this for this we will refer to the third example, session listener. That's the project name I have given. So in this session listener, see I'll use two listeners actually, not one. See this. One would be main, that is session listener. It is implementing, got it now? This is session listener. We are using this. Other one would be context listener. So in the session listener, what logic I have written? It is implementing HTTP session listener. Here I have to override two methods: session created, session destroyed. Clear? In the session created, okay, that is some logic I'll write. Apart from that, I'll be using one more listener called as context listener. See, this is very interesting. My context listener implements select context listener. I don't want to execute anything when the context object is destroyed, but I want to execute something when the context object gets created. So this is where I'll set the counter. Somewhere you should set the counter now. Some place you have to set the counter now. Where you will set? Correct. It's ideal that you set this counter in the context listener only. Okay, set the counter there. See this, how will I do? I want to work with the context object here. You'll understand why. So I'll get how se.get select context. That is okay. See, I have created an object of integer, and this integer object I'll put it into the context object. That's all I'm doing here, nothing else. Okay, and that name I'm giving is TC and CC. TC is total client, CC is current client. Initially when the application is deployed, both will be 0, no? Total client also 0, current client also 0. So assume that I'll deploy the application into the server. As soon as I deploy it, the context object gets created. Context object gets created. Immediately this method gets executed first. Yes or no? So this is an event and that logic gets executed. That is okay. So fine. Next, if a request is done, the request is done will be done to what? On JSP now. Now you know that when a request is done to a JSP, immediately the session object gets created. So the first client, for the first client, you can display application.get attribute of TC, application.get attribute of CC. For both it will be what? 1 and 1. Yes, why it is 1 and 1? See, here it was 0, but why it will become 1 and 1? Because as soon as the request is made to this JSP, which event happens? Session object gets created. As soon as the session object gets created, what happens? See this? This method gets executed. Session created logic gets executed. What is the logic you have written here? se dot get session. So this is how you get the reference to the session object in HTTP session listener interface class. You'll get it. Then what I'll do? After getting a reference to session, I'll get the reference to context also. Why I need the reference to context? Because TC and CC are there in context object. So which method I'll call? Session dot get select context. This is one more method. There is one method called as session dot get select context. Go and refer to the Java doc. Okay. So the return type of that is context. So now you are having two objects, session and context. Now these two objects are made as instance variable. Why? Because I use it in both the methods. I'll use session, these two objects in session created also as well as session destroyed also. That's why I made it as instance variable. Okay. So fine. Then after getting the reference to context object, what I am doing? I'll get the value from the context. Which one? TC also I'll get. And after getting TC, what I'll do? I'll increment it by 1. Similarly, CC also what I'll do? I'll increment it by 1. You see, integer dot parseInt, I'll get it. Int t is equal to t plus 1, incremented by 1. That new value from 0 it got changed to what? 1. 1 I'll put it into context object again. It will be replaced. Old value of 0 will be replaced with 1. Similarly, I'll get which one? CC. That also I'll increment it by 1 and I'll put it into the context object. It will be replaced. 0 will be replaced with 1. Fine. That has changed. So that is when it is displaying here. It will display you what? 1. It will display you now. Okay. Similarly, okay. Now another user logs in. What happens? Again my session listener. One more session, one home.js will come. Again which one will execute? Same thing. So current users will be what now? 2. Okay. So when they log out, this will go on executing. I'll show you that. What will happen now? I'll only decrement which one? Current clients. I'll not decrement total clients. That's all. Total clients I want to remain as it is now. So when the session object is destroyed, I'll be only decrementing current client. And I'll get that. I'll minus it now and I'll put it again back into the context object. That's it. Very simple logic. Okay. So this all logic you should know how to write now. Teaching logic is not my duty. My duty is only to teach you what? Concepts. So getting the idea, you should learn how to write the logics now. Yeah? So fine. Let's see this now. So what I'll do, we'll do one thing. I'll remove those two applications which are deployed. Otherwise, again they'll also go on getting executed. So better what we'll do? Remove these two. Stop the server. Remove it. Otherwise you'll see output from those examples also. That's why better you remove it. Okay, it's done now. Now I'll deploy this. Run on server. And please understand, run this application outside, not in this browser, because you need more clients now. So one browser will be treated as what? One client now. Firefox one client, Internet Explorer one client, Chrome browser is one client. See this now, how it will happen. First see the output clearly. So what is the URL? So please execute this program from outside. How many browsers you have, that much better it is. See this, I'll make the request. So right now when I deployed it, in the context object TC and CC are what? 0. When I make the request, sorry, I've taken the wrong, okay, sorry, the URL would be 03 session listener. So that's the URL. Yeah, see this? I think I'll close all the browsers once again if it is there. Okay, none are opened. Yeah, see this now. I'll make the first request. So TC and CC are both 0. Now see this, I'll paste, I'll make the request. Total users 1, current users 1. Correct? Now see this. I'll open Chrome browser. You have to open a different browser only. So in the Chrome browser also, make the request. Total users 2, current users 2. Why? Because session object gets created. You know, in the JSP, the session object is getting created implicitly. As soon as the session creation, now immediately the session object gets created, session creation method gets executed. Session creation, what it is doing? Incrementing both. And that incrementing TC and CC, that changed value will be displayed how? In home.jsp. Application dot get that TC and CC display. Next, I'll open, if you want, Firefox. One more browser. So what will be the result now? Three. Correct? Huh? So 3 browsers I opened. One is which one? Explorer. The other one would be Chrome. Other one is Firefox. Fine. Now one by one they'll log out. Let's see. Whom you want to log out now? Anyone can log out. Supposingly Chrome is there. Chrome logs out first. Log out. So when he logs out in the second slide, what I have done now? Session.invalidate I have done. So as soon as the invalidate happens, what will happen? Session destroyed method will get executed. Okay, he'll log out now. Fine. Now you refresh here. Current users is 2. Total users are 3. Okay. Again he'll log out. Okay. Now you come to Chrome browser now. Here, still this. You refresh. Refreshing is nothing but what? Making another request and one more response it is. So that time again the same logic will execute. Which one? 3 and 1 is there, but which logic is getting executed? Home.jsp only. Get attribute. TC is 3, CC is what? 1. Okay. If you want to go on making more requests, see this. Again Chrome 4, 2. Then okay, this is there. Firefox again. Different browsers. Don't open it in a single browser. I'll open and show it in a single browser also if you want. It will not work. Clear? Again you log out. This one is logged out. Again refresh here. Total users 5, current users something like 3 it will display. Log out. So finally, how many are there? Refresh 5 and 2 like that. So it goes on giving you the count. Clear? So this is how things get executed here. So clearly see the flow now, how it is happening. When I deployed it, now I show you the code one by one how it is getting executed. When I deployed it, what happened? My context listener got executed. TC and CC counter were set. Okay, then TC and CC are right now 0. The first request will be done to home.jsp. But before it gets the value and display, session object has been created. So when the session object has been created, TC and CC have been incremented to what? This method has got executed. So obviously TC and CC new value will be what? 1 and 1. That gets executed and it will display it. It is displaying here in the browser. So once it is displayed, when you click next, from home.jsp, it will display it. When I click log out here, in home.jsp, see this. This is Chrome or whatever. So it is getting displayed. So I'll click log out. As soon as I click log out, what happens? Actually, it is the request is going to what? Logout servlet. In the logout servlet, what I am doing? Session.invalidate. As soon as I say session.invalidate, session object will be destroyed. As soon as session object is destroyed, now in my session listener, what happens? This logic gets executed. It will decrement the CC now, current client. Yeah. So it will decrement the current client, and it will that same display it will be showed now when you refresh it. Yeah. So that's the logic. Nothing big here. So go through all this. So you are depending on session creation and session destruction events. So one simple example I given you and just given you the idea. Here I put SOP is there in those methods. Created, destroyed, whatever it is, the same. In those classes, listener classes I have written, it is printing. That's it. Yeah. So if you want, you can refer to the Java doc also. I'll close everything now. You can refer to the Java doc. Which one? HTTP session listener So see the HTTP session listener, which are the methods? Session created, session destroyed. We had clearly all the docs here. So again, frames, if you go, so we are just studying javax.servlet package, nothing else. We are completing the library, that's it. javax.servlet package. In this here, we have covered so many classes and interfaces. Single thread model, servlet response, servlet request attribute, servlet request attribute. All I have covered for you, that's it. We are exploring the library, nothing else. Context listener, config, context, all. And next class I will be covering this also. So almost all the classes and interfaces are covered in what? Servlet API. Just overview are given. And if you have control over this library, then you can write good applications. It's just exposure. Okay, so this much has to be covered in what? Servlet syllabus. Many people will tell you what? All that is not required. See this, all these are covered now. These are the classes. Okay, somehow covered. So, like this, you should know all this. Only then you can write a good application. But other institutes, what they'll do? Hello world, they'll teach until they'll tell what? Servlet is over. What do you mean by that? You are thinking I am teaching in depth. Honestly telling you, I have just given you overview. Imagine the fate of other institutes. Hardly they teach you anything. One output they'll teach you and say what? Course is only over. You can tell only you know Servlet technology only when you know all this classes and interfaces and all the various methods in that to one level. Okay, so as you go on developing web application, then you'll get the full grip of using all this. That time you'll not have any difficulty. Clear? So this is how you should learn. Just I gave it's an eye opener how you have to learn things. Clear? This is a beautiful library what you have got. So this is what you have done. See, we have completed this package also. These are all packages related with what? Servlet. This also I covered HTTP servlet request, HTTP send, so many classes and interfaces. One class will take one day sometimes. They contain heavy logic. One class encapsulates how many things, imagine. Class is nothing but what? Encapsulation of so much of logic. So all that logic you have to understand and then we will use it. Total abstraction, that is different. Understood? But if you know these many classes only, then only you can tell what? You know Servlet technology. Clear? Similarly, javax.servlet.jsp. How many packages are covered? Notice. Now we'll come to know why we spend so much time in what? Servlet and JSP. JSP package. There also I covered. Custom tags and all that. Then which one? EL. Here also I covered. So many things. Then tag extension like this. So these are all the classes and interfaces which you'll be using. But I am covering the most important ones, which a developer should know mandatorily. Others slowly with experience will learn. Understood? These are mandatory things which any developer should know before entering an industry. Then only you can survive. It will be easy for you to work also. Otherwise it will be very difficult for you. Are you clear? So fine. I think that's done. So now what you have to understand is, we completed this. Okay. What you have to understand, see, this we are almost all seeing what events and listeners are. That is okay. But these are all the problems a developer faces while developing a web application. What? He wants to accept a web request. Correct? Then he wants to write a web application, all that. So for developing a web application, we need a rich platform. That is what is JEE. We are coming to an end almost all now. So JEE is the super rich platform for developing what? Server-side applications or web-based applications. With the help of this server, you can develop any big application you want. And you have to concentrate only on domain logic or business logic. So without Servlet JSP, can you think of developing what? A web application? Practically no. And you should know it to a great extent. So that's why the companies expect you to know at least minimum things before entering there. You will tell I know Servlet and JSP. To what level you know Servlet and JSP, you only know now. What I have covered, what you know, you only know. But company expects you to learn to this extent. And obviously this all there is there in your college syllabus. Unfortunately, it has not been covered properly for you. Clear? Even if they want to cover, you don't attend, no. That is your problem. They'll be interested to teach. At that time what you'll be doing? You'll bunk the classes. Okay, first thing is they will also not teach. Second thing is you are also not interested. Both go hand in hand there. Now you want job, that's why you are learning all this. And the one best part is you have come to the best institute, you are getting all the good things here. If you go to any worst institute, you know what happens now. Hello world, Servlet is over. Hello world, JSP is over. That is not Servlet and JSP. Understood? So any library you know, any technology you know, you should know to this extent. So these are two technologies what we have covered. Which one? In server side. So more you will be seeing. So how good you know the technologies, that better and easily you can develop your application. How much time you spend here in learning Servlet JSP, that easy it is for your development. If you don't know this, what happens? You will have to struggle writing every day. Yeah? So that's what I am telling you. This is a super rich platform, and under this platform, which one? JEE, Servlet, JSP and all are sub-specifications. So JEE is super specification, Servlet is a sub-specification, JSP is a sub-specification. I had given you on table now. Okay, so remember now, this is the key thing what we are doing. What is JEE? Do not forget that. So JEE is a platform. Component technology, JSP, this is we are learning that one by one. How much you learn, that better you can develop your application. So JEE is what? Super specification set by Sun for the server vendors. I am concluding almost all, because within 2-3 days now Servlet JSP will also get over. Clear? So what we learned till now, this is a summary. I will conclude very clearly, then you will understand all this. Are you clear this? Don't forget. But many people tell what? JEE is what? Go and find out your friend's definition. What is JEE? They'll have their own super definitions. Okay. But JEE means what? Super specification set by Sun for server vendors. Correct? Huh? For a developer, it is a platform. From the Sun point of view, it is specification. From the developer point of view, it is platform. From the vendor point of view, it is the infrastructure what they are giving. All are correct. There are 3 triangles here. Do not forget. JEE. What it is? Sorry. What is JEE? One person will view it as one style. Sun says it is a specification. Okay. Developer says it's a platform. And vendor says it is a infrastructure. Use it. All are correct. So this is how you have to define JEE in the interview. But how do you define JEE? What is JEE? Java Enterprise Edition. Over. That's why you don't get. So you should tell JEE is the super specification set by Sun for the server vendors. Tell that. Now see how interested you'll be in the interview to continue. That is what you'll tell. Tata, see you, goodbye. Understood? So it is an infrastructure from the vendor point of view, and from here it is for the developer it is platform. So when you read books about JEE, these words will be used commonly. JEE is a platform, JEE is a specification, JEE is a infrastructure. Be careful, you have to understand these words properly. Yeah? So you will be reading documents now, you have to, otherwise how will you code now? So fine. So just I gave an idea, means what support we have got here. Okay, some more support we'll see now. I'll conclude this with which one? The session. Some more events and listeners I'll complete it. Okay, pending things are there. So just have an idea now. So these many things are mandatory, okay, for you to enter the industry. Coming back to events and listeners now. Theoretically I'll tell you this. Not that much important, okay, because you will not develop applications to that level. Correct now? Your ability you know now. First you will tell what? I know everything, I'll code everything. And now you know your ability. Okay, means after 3, 4, 5 years you'll be coding these kind of applications as you get experience. But today only I'll give some idea so that it will be useful for you in the later years. So see this. All these events you know. There are some events which occur in the server side in the web container. Okay. Servlet context creation, Servlet, this all you know. I'll come to this one now. Session object activation and passivation, session migration. These two are also considered to be what? Events. Now let's talk about this. When does the session object get activated and passivated? First, we have discussed all this in the prior classes. Okay, but still I'll have to tell it now. Why you know? You're that very intelligent. You'll tell you know everything. What I covered in just 10 classes back you have forgotten. That is your fate. Okay, so be prepared. So when does the session object get activated and passivated? When does it get passivated first of all? See, this is the server. In the server, in the container you got session objects now. This is the web container, and you'll have what? When the request, you know when the session object gets created. If it is servlet, request.getSession. If it is JSP, implicitly will get created. So like this, how many session objects will be there now? Depends on number of clients. Understood? Now, supposingly now 1000 clients have made the request. 1000 clients have made the request and they are using the application. Now what happens? 1000 session objects will be there now. Yes. Now suddenly, means when 1000 clients are logged in, it's not that all users will be using continuously the application. Some might be busy on phone, or they might be doing some other work 15 minutes, they might be offline. So that time what happens? Why should the session object be active here? So that is when what happens? It gets passivated, means it becomes inactive. Inactive means what it will do now? The data in the session object will be written to the hard disk. Somewhere it will write through some serialization process. Through some serialization process it will write it to the hard disk and data will be saved, and then that object becomes passivated. Okay, it's not destroyed, remember that, because still client is using it, and session timeout might be something like approximately 30 minutes. 30 minutes is the session timeout, and your still session timeout is 30 minutes. Yeah, session.invalidate method has not executed, so it has not got destroyed. At the same time, timeout also has not happened. So what happens now? Session object will be alive. But why should it be? If it is alive, it is consuming memory. So that time it will get passivated. Passivated means, just understand, object becoming inactive. But before it will not be consuming memory now. Okay. So before it gets passivated, it will write it to the hard disk or somewhat, and then it will get passivated. Again, when the client come back, he is in 15 minutes now. 16th minute he will come back now. Okay, 15 minutes he is not using the application. 16th minute he will come back now. What will happen now? It will get activated. So for scalability purpose and better performance, session object activation and passivation will happen. Understood? This is one event. So session activation and passivation is also one event now. So if you want to write any logic when this event happens, that also you can write. For that there is one listener interface. I show you that. Okay, and that listener interface is there, you can use that. Apart from that, you know, this activation and passivation happens during session migration also. Okay, session migration also I discussed. So there also, so activation and passivation will happen under two conditions. One for supporting scalability, one while doing migration. Okay, so activation and passivation will happen at two times. So whatever the case, whenever an activation happens, that's an event. Whenever a passivation happens, that's an event. So there are some methods, you can write some logic there and you can execute it also. Okay. Now that is one event. Activation and passivation is an event. Session migration is also an event. Understood? Session migration is also event. So you know what is session migration now? All refer to the docs I had given you. I'll go on teaching you everything, you keep on forgetting everything. Here that's not the solution. Yeah, you know what is session migration now? You'll deploy your application into what? Multiple machines. Okay, when you deploy your application in multiple machines, what will happen? Why are you doing this? Scalability. Because more users are coming in now. So whenever the request comes, load balancing server is there. Okay, the load balancing server will decide to which server to send the request. Supposingly the first request goes to the first server, here, this server, something like machine 1, and response is given. Same client makes a request, but for him the session object had got created, ID was generated, it was given back to him. Next time the client makes the request, he is sending the ID. So if ID comes, session is object should not be created. Server is not supposed to create the session object. But the request has been routed to what? Machine 3 now. Load balancing server saw that these two machines are busy with other clients. So it routed the request to some other machine. When it routed the request to some other machine, what happens? The session object is there now. Here you are calling request.get session. Session object is there. So session has to migrate. So that is also an event. But here what happens? It gets passivated first, then it will migrate, then it will activate. So activation and passivation is an event. It happens during migration also. For scalability also it will happen, while migration also it will happen. And remember, deploying an application in multiple machines only is called as what? Clustering of JVM. Deploying an application in multiple JVMs only is called as clustering of JVM. And clustering is not supported by all containers because it is not there in the specification. I told you this. Yes, clustering is one more extra feature given to you by whom now? Server vendors. Okay, if they give you that clustering support, it is called as what? Distributed container. Only distributed containers support you what? Clustering. Understood? And session migration is supported only in distributed containers. So before you buy the server, you have to ask the vendor, is it having distributed container support? All that will be supported, then only you have to buy that. Understood? So all this will happen in what? Hi-Fi applications where you can't predict the number of users. But you will be writing applications for what? Organizations. When our companies or enterprises. In an enterprise, you know how many users will be coming in. Okay, this happens in networking sites like Facebook and all that where you can't predict the number of users. So when you develop those type of applications, that time these events and listeners will be needed for you. Yes or no? Which one? Migration and all, that time it will be needed. So just I gave you an idea like how you can use these events and listeners. So just understand it from theory point of view. I just explained you what are these events, and for those supporting those events, what are the listener classes. Here I give you a full document. The process of migrating object from one server to another server in clustered environment is called session migration. That's the event. When a session object moves from one VM to another VM, the session object gets passivated in one VM and gets activated in another VM. That's an event. Activation is the process of becoming inactive. Active. Passivation is the process of becoming inactive. See, in non-distributed container, activation and passivation of session object will occur only to support scalability. Activation and passivation is there in non-distributed container also, but it will be only for supporting scalability. Activation and passivation are events. I had mentioned this in Servlet doc. Now you are understanding how it gets related. Clear? So these are the two things. Okay, so for that no example, but I have covered the most important events in those examples. Which are there? You know now, events. Context creation, destruction, session creation, destruction, adding attributes, removing attributes, something like that. Okay, slowly you'll understand. So this completes events and listeners. Okay, that's it then.